to glue baste so that it's easy to sew. At a quick glance, EPP can look intricate and hard, but it's not really. Hi, I'm Susan from Studio 708. When I discovered English paper piecing, I couldn't stop dreaming about it and thinking of different things to do with it. Now I can't stop designing and making patterns for it. Stick around to the end of the video for a tip on how to create a kaleidoscopic effect on your English paper piecing. Let's go over some of the cutting tools that I use. So first things, I use this Sue Daily rotating mat, I guess I should say. It just helps whenever you're trying to move your fabrics around and you don't want to have to move the fabric, you can just move the whole board. So this is one of my top tips. Not necessary, you can use a regular flat cutting mat, but this one is helpful. The next thing will be an 18 millimeter rotary cutter. And I like this small size just because it's easy to see where I'm starting and stopping when I cut the fabric, so that I'm not using that big 45 millimeter blade that kind of goes so far you can't really tell where you're stopping. So that's top on my list. The next thing you're going to need is some kind of templates. So I like these, that glare off of there. I like these that are the ones from paperpieces.com. These have a 3/8 inch seam allowance on them. They also make some that just have a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on them, but I like that little bit of extra because I feel like when I wrap it around the paper that I need to have a little bit more in there to play with so that it doesn't fray. One thing about English paper piecing is when you're cutting, all of these edges can be on a bias, and so they will fray easier than if it's just cut straight on grain. So keep that in mind, and I do recommend the 3/8 inch seam allowance. So I have one here for a 60-degree diamond and one here for a 2-inch, well, this is a 2-inch diamond, 60-degree diamond. This is a 2-inch hexagon. They will fit together, as you can see where they're lined up right there. So acrylic templates are the easiest thing to cut around. If you've purchased the pattern for the castle garden, you will have some templates, paper templates that you can cut out. I would recommend using some kind of board. These aren't the templates, but you'll have a page that looks like this, that's something with the template. But you'll have, I would recommend using like maybe a file folder, a plastic file folder, or one of the kid kind of folders that's plastic, so it'll be a little bit sturdier for you while you're going around. These, you can see they're relatively thick, so it kind of helps hold up longer. The blade here, you need to make sure that this part that's holding the blade in can go past, I don't know if you can see that, can go past the edge of the template. It's not helping out. So I don't know if you can see that, but it's just barely, there we go, just barely past that, so you can easily cut through your fabric. So let's get into cutting. And the first thing I want to cut is not any directional design. Well, it is directional, but it's not going to matter. There's no specific design on here that I'm trying to get on my shape. So I can just lay my template basically anywhere on here. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of get close to the edge, and I'm going to move this a little bit more to the middle, and then you just start cutting. So I'm holding the template steady in the middle, and I also put my hands on the edges so that it tries not to slip either direction. And if you keep your rotary cutter straight up and down and try not to push too hard one way or the other, that'll help you be more accurate and keep your template from slipping. The other thing is, if you cut outside of this, farther away from the template, it's not going to hurt anything. All this extra is seam allowance, and it'll wrap to the back of the paper piece, and it'll be on the inside of your quilt. I know there's quilt police out there, and they're going to tell you have to be perfect every time. You do not. You could actually cut, just around this template roughly, and you would still have a piece that would sew up perfectly fine. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this piece so you can see. And see how this rotating mat makes that easier because I haven't had to move my fabric. Okay, so now we have a hexagon that is just exactly like our template. Like I said, if you want to be messy and cut around it, no problems, no quilt police here. You do you do what you want to do and what's easier for you. So that's a hexagon. That one's fairly simple. And next we'll get into cutting a diamond. So once again on this one, there's no specific shape that I'm after. No specific design on the fabric, excuse me, that I'm after. So we'll just lay our template basically anywhere on here that you want your design to be. So I'm going to hit right in here, and same thing, we're just going to cut right around our template. Okay, I will say it does make it easier if you have a new blade in your rotary cutter. I'll use it for 2 or 3 projects, but after a while they get dull and it gets hard to cut easily. So now we have a shape here, and you'll notice that mine slipped a hair up here, but once again, that's in the seam allowance, and I do have that 3/8, so I'm not going to worry about that so much. So that's how you cut your hexagons and your diamonds. If this video has been helpful to you, please like and subscribe. It's a small effort on your part, but a large help for our channel. Thanks. Let's talk about glue basting our paper pieces to our fabric. So if you purchased the pattern, you should have included with that these paper pieces, you should have included these paper templates here. So these are the same shape as paperpieces.com paper templates, or paper pieces. That's a whole bunch of P's and weird words. But anyhow, you can print these and cut these out, cut them right on the line, and use cardstock for that, and these will work just as well. And then if you like it, you can always go to Paper Pieces and buy a bigger pack. So I'm going to take our hexagon that we just cut out. This is the one that we cut exactly to the template, and we're going to glue our fabric, or glue our paper into that. So the glue stick that I use for this is the Soline glue stick. It has a fairly small tip glue pen in there. You can also use like the purple Elmer's glue sticks. They are of course cheaper than these are. I just happen to like this one, and this is what I use, but you can choose whichever tool works best for you and your budget. So I have this paper template here. I am going to center it in the middle of my fabric piece, and I just try to make sure that I have about the same amount on every side. Then you're just going to start on one edge and work your way around. Now we don't want to put the glue right on the very edge of the paper where the paper touches the fabric, because that's where we're going to be sewing, and we don't want to have to sew through glue as well as all the other things. So I'm going to start back just a little bit here, and I'm coming off onto the fabric, come down on my paper, and then off onto the fabric over here. Then I'm going to press the fabric up and then press it down. What I'm not doing is shoving that fabric up and pulling it super, super tight along this edge, because I want to leave a little bit of wiggle room right here so that I can get my needle into that when we go to sew it. So it's snug, but it's not tight. And we're just going to keep working our way around this shape until we get all the sides done. So this is another place this rotating cutting board comes in handy, so I can just keep turning without having to move the shape itself. You'll get the hang of how much pressure or how much to push right here. I'm just not pushing a whole lot right at this point. I'm just barely pushing it down, pushing it over. I don't know how to explain that to you, but you'll get the hang of how it feels and what's too tight and what's not with your stitching. Okay, so now everything is stuck down. We didn't use a ton of glue to do this so that we'll be able to get our paper out at the end of this project. The paper does not stay in the quilt when you're finished with it. After you've sewn shapes together, you can take the paper pieces out because they're no longer necessary. The only reason they're in there is to help you get the shapes and the sides staying where they're supposed to be folded until you're done sewing it. Okay, so that was our one that we followed the template that looks nice and clean on the inside. Here's the one that was kind of messy cut where it's not even around, but we'll do the same thing. We're just going to find a place that's kind of in the center of our design, and you can see here that the seam allowance is much, much larger than the one we just did. But we're going to take and do the same thing. So I'm just running a line of glue, and you can see it's not too much. And then we're just folding up and pressing down. And I usually work in this counterclockwise motion. It doesn't really matter which direction you go on this one. I just like to be consistent and just get in the habit of doing the same thing on pretty much every piece. Okay, so you can see now it has a larger seam allowance inside, but that's going to be inside your quilt and nobody's going to know but you, so don't worry about it. If anybody fusses about it or any quilt police are after you, just tell them that you don't care. It doesn't matter, you do you. They both look the same on the outside, so no big deal whichever way you want to do it. Okay, let's do a diamond, and the diamonds do have a little bit more effort to them because they're going to have some edges that actually stick out, and we have to address that. So on our hexagons, we didn't have anything that would stick out like that because everything is folding in from larger to a smaller. On the diamond, it's folding across and it's bringing it out to the sides. We're calling these ears. So when we talk about a dog ear or a ear on fabric, that's what they're meaning. So I have these shapes cut already here, and I've got my diamond paper here. I can just lay this same thing. I'm going to try to center it up here, and I'm going to try to center it up here and make sure I have approximately the same amount of seam allowance on each side. This is, once again, why I like the 3/8 inch seam allowance on my templates, because it gives me a little bit more wiggle room where this really doesn't look like a lot of room. So just go with that. So I told you I based in a counterclockwise motion on this, and I'm going to do the same thing here. But I'm going to let you know the tip that Tula taught that has been very beneficial to me is the first side that you baste is the side the ears will face. Okay, doesn't quite rhyme, but it still sticks in your head. So first side that you baste is the side the ears will face. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom, or this bottom edge, and glue that one first. So right now my ear is facing that way, but we're not done. So we're coming over here and we're going to do it again. And so now we have ears facing that way. But this was the first side that we basted. This is the side my ears will face. So when I turn this around and I work on the other side, when the piece is done, you can see that ear now faces the first side that I basted. So I guess for this rhyme, we're going to have to say the first side that we base is the side our ears will face. Our first side that we basted is the side our ears will face. I don't know. It sticks in your head after a while, but goes through my head every time I base something because I need to think about where those ears are going to face. So there are going to be times that you might want this ear to face this way and this ear to face this way. But I would say, well, for this pattern, every time you can do it like this and you'll be fine. 90% of the time, this will work for me, both ears facing the same direction. And when we go to sew it, we'll talk about how those interlock and why that's important. If you are interested in doing more English paper piecing, I have a pattern for sale on my website. Just go to studio708.com and look for Castle Garden.